Welcome to Installing SQL Server 2012, Part 2, and we'll just continue with where we left off in Part 1. If you remember, we ended up on the Disk Space Requirements window, and it shows us that based on the components that we chose on the Feature Selection page, this is how much space we'll need in the various directories. And so we click Next on that, and now we get to a very interesting window here. Notice it's asking us, and again, I don't know if you can read this because it's so small, but Microsoft recommends you use a separate account for each SQL Server service. Notice you have the SQL Server Agent service, the Database Engine service, and then the Browser service. And they have these out here, and you can click the little drop down and choose the account name and a password, and you can set the startup type for each service. And they have the agent service manual by default. You may want to change that to automatic. Don't worry about that for right now. I would just take the defaults. We can always come back and change this later if we need to. But for what you're doing, you're really not setting up a production server. You're just setting up kind of a test SQL server to play with data warehousing. So I would kind of take these defaults right here. If your screen is blank here, then you'll want to click the drop down and choose from the available ones and take an administrator account if you get a choice there. So then we'll click Next after reviewing that. And then we'll get this screen, and you'll notice there's a little bit more information on this one. This is the Database Engine configuration. Now on this Server Configuration tab, we can choose the authentication mode on SQL Server. Now if you're in a data warehousing class, you're probably already familiar with what these are. We can choose Windows Authentication Mode, which will allow us to interact with Windows Active Directory service. And if we're logged in to Active Directory, then our permissions can just kind of automatically be ported over to SQL Server. Mixed mode will work with Windows Authentication or SQL Server Authentication. SQL Server Authentication is where we go in and explicitly set up users and give them permissions. Okay. If we use SQL Server Authentication mode, then we will also have to set a password for the SA account. But if we just use Windows Authentication, we won't need that. And for the purpose of this course, we can just use Windows Authentication. We can also, down here, we will need to choose who our SQL Server administrators are. And I can just click to add the current user who is installing this. And as long as you're an administrator installing it, that will be fine. Or you can click Add here and look out into your user accounts and choose the appropriate user. Most of the time it's going to be easier for you to just click Add Current User. You will see that pop up here in the screen just like mine did here. Notice the administrator account on this machine, and I'll be good to go. Then notice there's a Data Directories tab here and a file stream. And on the Data Directories tab, just like you see right here, you can change the settings where all these directories are going to go. Notice your data root directory, program files, Microsoft SQL Server. Then your user database directory, program files, Microsoft SQL Server, MS SQL 11, .mssql.server, and on and on and on. This is where we want to place our sample databases later on. I'll point that out when we get there, okay? And then the user database log directory, where all your transaction logs will go, your temporary database directory, your temporary log directory, and your backup directory. So you can leave all these at the defaults. It's probably what you'll want to do right now. Again, in a production environment, you probably want to move these to your other storage locations. But for now, we'll just take these as default, but just know it's there. File stream, way outside what we're going to do here in this course, so I won't even discuss this particular tab right here, right now. But keep that in mind, and you may want to go out and read about that later. Then I would click Next, and the next screen that comes up has to do with error reporting. Now, this is a easy way to see certain administrators start to throw furniture around the room, and that is, do we want to help Microsoft improve SQL Server features and services by sending Windows and SQL Server error reports to Microsoft or to your corporate report server. And this only applies to services that run without user interaction. There's a lot of strong feelings about this, whether you want to provide this stuff to Microsoft. A lot of control freaks don't. Some people do. Totally up to you. There's not a right or a wrong here. So just kind of do whatever you would like there. Now, once we get past that window, we're now ready to install. And this is kind of a recap window. It is letting us know prerequisites that have already been installed. Notice it's showing us our edition, and we're installing an evaluation edition. We've installed Windows PowerShell 2.0 as a prerequisite. the .NET Framework 3.5. What needs to be installed as this installation progresses, it needs to add the 4.0 framework because it's not there. And notice this may require a reboot. Visual Studio 2010 shell will need to be there. And then if you can scroll down here in a live environment and see everything else that's going on. Notice this is going to be the instance name, MS SQL Server, and you've got all the features that were added. And notice I didn't add all the features in. I'll go back and correct that later, but I was just trying to get some screenshots for you guys. So there's a lot more information here, but this is what you're going to install and what you're going to end up with. Now at this point, you're pretty much going to be ready to click this thing and just kind of watch and wait. And I've got just a few more comments to tell you about the installation. So what I'm going to do is stop this. This will be the end of part 2. Join me in part 3 and we'll finish this installation up.